this time, we do have the sponsor here. Yes. And LD is 991. Are there any legislators present that are going to want to testify on the next two bills? I see Senator Johnson and also Representative Timberlake, and Senator Burns is going to be next. We're going to, so Representative.
Fellow members of the Joint Standing Committee on Agriculture, Conservation, and Forestry. My name is Michelle Dunphy, and I represent Old Town in the Indian Island Voting District, also known as District 122. And I'm here today to present to you LD991, an act to amend Maine's genetically modified food products labeling law. In the 126th legislature, LD718, an act to protect Maine food consumers' right to know about genetically engineered food, was passed to require labeling of food containing genetically modified organisms, or GMOs. But Mainers still don't know if their food contains GMOs because the bill was passed with a trigger provision that 5 contiguous states, including Maine, also passed similar laws before Maine's bill can go into effect. LD 718 also had a sunset date of January 1st, 2018. Nevertheless, the bill represents exciting legislation and a huge step forward and speaks to what the people of Maine and consumers want. They want to know what's in their food. And as a consumer, a mom, and a person who cares deeply about the food I purchase and bring into my home, I felt this legislation was of critical importance in allowing us to make choices with regard to our food. And choice is what my bill, LD 991, is further attempting to achieve. This bill is not mandating we ban GMOs in our food. It only asks that consumers be able to know if their food contains GMOs. It's really that simple. It's putting the power of the choice into the hands of Maine consumers that want this knowledge to make decisions with regard to food. I know many people who purchase food without reading labels of any kind. I also know many people who purchase food based on budget, not on whether food is local or organic or has a certain percentage of fat. It is my belief this type of consumer will continue to purchase whether we require labeling or not. As for myself, I always read labels. I read every label. I have a lifetime of allergies and learned as a child the value of a label. And while I still have food allergies and sensitivities, reading a label has become so much more. I read labels to look for organic foods, I look for additives, I look for allergens, and I look for non-GMO food. It's my personal choice to buy local, to buy organic, to buy food that does not contain GMOs. The point is, it's about choice and the right to know. The right to make informed decisions. And I'll be honest, there are times I purchase food that likely contains GMOs. The impetus for my bill was an article in a local newspaper touting genetically modified apples would be coming to Maine this summer. And in my mind, that's just simply wrong. The fall in Maine is when I have fond memories of apple picking as a child and taking my daughter to a nearby orchard for the first time when she was a baby. Making applesauce, apple pie, apple cider, and eating so many apples, I always vow never to eat another, until I do. Apples are one of the things that people associate with the state of Maine. When apples are so plentiful, how are we going to know a genetically modified apple when we see it? Maine has the greatest increase in the percentage of young organic farmers in the country. We have a bounty of CSAs, CFF, farmers market, local markets, organic farms, and wonderful crops that people identify with Maine. I have a CSA with Snake Root Organics, and I proudly visit the year-round farmers market in Orono. And I take deep pride not only in the choices I make, but that I am able to make them. And we have so much to be proud of when it comes to our food culture. Beyond all that, in my mind, this issue is simple. We want GMOs labeled. We want choice. Maine is a sovereign state, and we don't want to wait for New Hampshire or any other state to act. I believe we should be a leader in this movement and that we have the right to know what is in our food. For me, this bill is about clarity in consumer choice and food safety, but you'll be hearing from a lot of people today who have other and overlapping reasons for supporting this important legislation. Promotion of public health, increased food safety, prevention of consumer confusion, negative effects on the environment of increased pesticide use, promotion of Maine agriculture, and the protection of cultural and religious practices. I believe the Committee on Agriculture, Conservation, and Forestry is the best and the most exciting committee of all of the joint standing committees, simply because this committee touches every person in the state of Maine with our decisions. We have a responsibility to do what's right and what's just for the people of Maine, and making decisions about the food we eat is powerful. Consider the recent polling showing 97% of the people surveyed in Maine are in favor of labeling. And again, we're talking about labels for food containing GMOs, not banning GMOs. People want to know what's in their food, and simply put, they have a right to know. Thank you, and I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Yeah. Questions from Representative Dunphy? Seeing none, thank you very much for your presentation, for your introduction. Is your committee completed, finished for the day?
No, sir, we just got through the first bill. And then you got half of the committee here.
We will hear from representatives and senators next.
Senator Edgecombe and Representative Hickman and distinguished members of the Joint Standing Committee on Agriculture, Conservation and Forestry. My name is David Burns, and I represent Senate District Number 6, which is all of Washington County and parts of Hancock County. And before you today present the bill LD991, an act to require labeling on all genetically modified products. My privilege to be able to present this bill to you today at the request of one of my constituents. I say this because I was elected, just as you were, to fairly represent all of my constituents. It's my belief that we as legislators are the connection to the legislative process, one of the primary means they have to effect change in the laws that govern us. My constituent, who we will hear from momentarily, has devoted much of her adult life in advocating for the protection we citizens need and for our environment. This bill demonstrates these efforts to protect Maine people from, in her opinion, harmful, genetically engineered food. This bill adds seed stock to the laws regarding the labeling of genetically engineered food. It would also end the exemption from the labeling requirement for the packaged processed food with only a minimum content of genetically engineered materials by July of 2019. It replaces the reference to eating establishments and amends the law passed in the 126th legislature pertaining to the adoption of GMO requirements by 5 states for at least 20 million people. I know that this committee is spending much of the day today discussing similar legislation from various perspectives. I believe that your collective wisdom and experience will sort through these issues and come to some positions that the entire legislature can take action upon. My request is that you give this perspective due consideration and not let it get lost in the process. Finally, I want to thank my constituent Nancy Holden for bringing these ideas to you through me, and thank this committee for entertaining them.
Questions for Senator Burns? Thank you.
Thank you,
Senator Burns. Johnson, would you like to?
I would, let Representative Pouliot go first.
Okay.
We have an urgent matter.
Is the education still going?
Yes, sir. We got a work session on allowing marijuana in schools, so that should be interesting.
I'm glad I'm not there.
Senator Edgecombe, we do miss you down there, though, Senator Edgecombe. Senator Edgecombe, Representative Hickman, and members of the Agriculture, Conservation and Forestry Committee. I'm Representative Matt Pouliot. I proudly represent House District 86, which is right outside the window, west of North Augusta. And I'm really proud to be here for my first time in front of the Ag Committee after 2 terms in the legislature. So I'm actually going to be presenting testimony in support of LD991, which I'm a co-sponsor of, on behalf of Jerry Greenfield, who is the co-founder of Ben & Jerry's Ice Cream. And I think another reason why we should really be in love with Ben & Jerry's Ice Cream. They're in favor of labeling and transparency, which I think is very important. So on behalf of all of us at Ben & Jerry's, I want to thank the committee for this opportunity to provide testimony on LD991, an act to amend Maine's GMO labeling law. My sincere apologies for not being able to join you in person. I look forward to having the opportunity to visit Maine sometime in the near future in support of this important issue. Ben & Jerry's supports LD991, and we'd be proud to have Maine join Vermont in instituting a no-strings-attached GMO labeling law. The recent Second Circuit Court decision regarding Vermont's Act 120, allowing the state to move forward with implementation, reinforces our position that states have the authority to require companies to disclose the presence of genetically engineered ingredients. I'd like to focus my remarks today on 3 main areas. Our position on transparency and a consumer's right to know, and specifically mandatory labeling of genetically engineered food. Ben & Jerry's approach to packaging and the frequency with which we make changes to our packaging. And third, the question of whether mandating labeling of GMO food would have any impact on food prices at the supermarket. First, I'll discuss our position on transparency and labeling. At Ben & Jerry's, we are pleased to stand with many consumers, companies, advocates, and policymakers in supporting the push to require mandatory labeling of food products with genetically engineered ingredients. We strongly believe that people have a right to know what's in the food they eat, and that only by providing information on the product's packaging can we ensure people's freedom to choose what's in the food they purchase. Just like labels that require disclosure of farm-raised salmon or orange juice from concentrate, labeling the GE food will provide consumers the information they need to make choices for themselves and their families. At Ben & Jerry's, we've been long-standing proponents of consumers' right to know. That's most notably expressed in our hard-fought campaign to inform consumers about recombinant bovine growth hormone, RBGH. Ben & Jerry's was one of the first companies to label our products with RBGH message, and we led the legal fight almost 15 years ago to clear the way for all companies who sought to tell consumers that their products came from cows not treated with genetically engineered growth hormone. It's clear that the interest in labeling is a consumer-driven movement, and it's growing. We hear it daily from our fans. We don't believe that increasing interest in where our food comes from is a trend and that it's going to go away. And as a fast-moving consumer goods company, we think the best approach is to stand with our consumers who are calling for increased transparency about what's in our food. I do want to say that we would prefer a national framework for GMO labeling. However, absent that, we believe a harmonized, state-by-state approach can create a path that achieves the same end. A handful of states can create the critical mass that will have the effect of a de facto national standard. To be clear, we do not believe the bill introduced in the United States Congress by Representative Mike Pompeo meets the test for creating a national mandatory GMO labeling standard. A voluntary standard that preempts states' rights is a step in the wrong direction and will only enhance consumer confusion. New England is leading the way on this issue, and I would urge you to join Vermont in passing legislation requiring mandatory labeling of genetically engineered food without a trigger. Now let me spend a couple minutes talking about packaging and why opponents of labeling who suggest that it will raise food prices are simply wrong. Let me give you a little background on how we manage packaging at Ben & Jerry's, which I hope will help you understand why a small label change like LD991 contemplates would not be an onerous one. The overwhelming majority of Ben & Jerry's packaging that Ben & Jerry's packaging buys is for our pint business. We have about 50 different SKUs in our portfolio at any given time. Every year we drop a few flavors and add a few more. There are a number of reasons why food companies will make changes to their packaging. From ever-evolving regulatory landscape to allergen concerns, ingredient and formula changes, new marketing claims, as well as updates to brands' look and feel. As a food company, we regularly make changes, sometimes big, sometimes small, to our packaging. In fact, every year we make changes to between 25 and 50% of our packaging. Over the last 7 years, we've gone through 3 full-line redesigns. That's changing every single pint in our line. For food companies, evolving packaging is just part of doing business. At Ben & Jerry's, we manage our packaging inventory very closely so that our packaging evolves. We can do it without having to write off out-of-date packaging. There are risks to food businesses in sitting on large inventories of packaging. In 2013, we achieved fair trade certification across the entire product line of our flavors, and so we added the fair trade mark to all of our pints. It was a rolling transition for our pints as we phased in the fair trade certified ingredients and then added claim to our packaging. As we went through this process, for our top selling flavors, we were literally ordering packaging on a weekly basis. For our second tier flavors, we were ordering every 3 weeks. The important point here is that this change to every single pint package in our line of adding the fair trade certification mark was not a cost passed through to consumers. Again, that wasn't a pass through to consumers. It did not impact their pricing at all. There are a number of things that could potentially impact the cost of products, first and foremost dairy prices. And while there are a variety of things that can impact the price the consumer pays at the retail, for a pint of Ben & Jerry's, small changes in our packaging is not one of them. The recent announcement by Hershey, along with previous announcements by General Mills and Post, that they will source non-GMO ingredients in some cereals, and Chipotle's completion of their transition to non-GMO ingredients only reinforces the point that interest and momentum is on the side of transparency and GMO labeling. If we can label farm-raised salmon and concentrated orange juice, certainly we can require labeling on GMO food. I'd like to thank you for this opportunity to submit testimony on this critical bill. And he said that you can reach out to his assistant, Chris Miller, at 802-846-1500 if you have any questions. And I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have with me.
Any questions for Representative Pouliot? Thank you for your testimony.
Thank you.
And good luck. Welcome, Senator Johnson.
Good afternoon.
Welcome.
Senator Edgecombe, Representative Hickman, members of the Agriculture, Conservation, and Forestry Committee. I'm Senator Chris Johnson, representing State Senate District 13 in the Mid-Coast region. I'm here today in support of LD991, an act to amend Maine's genetically modified food products labeling law. As someone who believes strongly in the rights of people, I was a proud lead co-sponsor of LD 718 in the 126th legislature, which became law. Everyone has a right to decide for themselves about the food they grow or buy and what they feed their families. The impact and long-term human safety of genetically engineered food ingredients remain unproven. GMO labeling enables consumers to reduce their risks. These are the concepts behind Maine's current GMO labeling law. In the spirit of compromise, with people greatly concerned about Maine going it alone on labeling of GMOs and the possible legal expenses of constitutionality challenges, etc., we put a trigger on the bill of 5 contiguous states, including Maine, to enact similar laws before our labeling would go into effect. Several things have changed since it was enacted. Connecticut passed a similar law with a trigger. Vermont passed a similar law without a trigger. The World Health Organization concluded that glyphosate, as used on Roundup-ready genetically engineered crops, probably causes cancer. The Federal Circuit Court in Vermont ruled that Vermont's GMO labeling law is constitutional. And 97% of Maine people now support GMO labeling. In other words, we are no longer alone among New England states. The danger of the most widely used weed killer aimed exclusively at GMO crops is now a recognized health concern. And Vermont has already won an important first legal decision in the industry challenge to their GMO labeling law. Mainers are overwhelmingly ready now for GMO labeling. Yet for lack of labeling to inform us as consumers, you and I, our children and grandchildren, even our unborn, remain laboratory rats in this ill-conceived experiment conducted on a national scale. All people should have the right to opt out of that experiment. But it is not that simple, because we cannot live without food. And we do not know which food is made with genetic engineering. Labeling can prevent that inherent deception. It enables informed choice by consumers. And Maine's thriving local food economy would likely benefit from the right to know GMO labeling, particularly because wholesomeness is part of Maine's brand image. Maine can protect, support, and find opportunity in ensuring that foods here were not made with genetic engineering unless they say so. And now we have fewer reasons to delay doing so, and one good reason why we should do it now: the health risks of our families. I urge you to affirm Maine people's right to know which foods are made with genetically engineered ingredients through an ought-to-pass report on LD911. It's time to pull the trigger on GMO labeling. Thank you, and I'd be glad to answer questions.
Any questions for Senator Johnson? Thank you. Thank you for your testimony. Representative. Representative Black.
Mr. Chairman, I don't see any cider or apples on our... I think I already taken care of that, Representative Black, in a previous engagement when I was here. Senator Edgecombe, Representative Hickman, and distinguished members of the Standing Committee of Agriculture, Conservation, and Forestry. I am State Representative Jeffrey Timberlake, representing District 75, Leeds, Turner, and part of Livermore. I stand before you to oppose LD991, an act to amend Maine's genetically modified food products labeling law. I oppose this bill not because I'm against GMO labeling, but because it's wrong to put Maine on an island. Maine coming to Maine. Our family alone will be planting around 12,000 new apple trees this year, and not one of them is genetically modified. I do not know of anyone else who plans on producing them, because even in the Northeast. And the reason I say this is because I didn't want to be a hypocrite on my ethanol bill, and I hope that we don't do that here by doing something that Washington should be fixing and not us. I thank you for the opportunity to speak on this bill, and I'd be happy to answer any questions that you may have. And as you know, this amendment got put on from Representative Black, and I put it on last time because it was a way to keep Maine in a good place, and I think it was a good amendment, and we did it again. Thank you.
Senator Dill has a question.
I'm sure he does.
Just out of curiosity, do you know anything about the genetically modified apple that they're talking about?
I know enough to be scary.
That goes without saying, but I was just curious on this.
Thank you, Senator Dill, but all I know is it's basically being grown up in Canada is where it was being tested, and I hadn't heard of it. It was news to me to hear today that it would be going into production anywhere, because we haven't heard of it going anywhere, nor do we even know if we can even grow it in the Northeast at this point in time.
Thank you.
Hearing no further questions? We're open for legislators still.